Good evening. It is 6:03 PM on Tuesday, April 29th, and I would like to call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome those who are participating in the Board of Education meeting in person and those watching the meeting via live streaming on YouTube. We would ask that anyone addressing the board to please use the microphone at the podium and to identify themselves for the record. As a reminder, the link to the meeting is on the district webpage under Board of Education. The streaming will run through the end of the meeting. In the event there is a disruption in the streaming, I will pause the meeting until it is reestablished. We're on item B, Pledge of Allegiance. If you would please stand with me, and Mr. Size, would you please lead the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. We are on item C, announcement of the meeting. Mrs. Chavez, would you please announce the meeting?
This meeting has been announced in accordance with the New Mexico Open Meetings Act and the Los Lunas Schools Open Meetings Resolution and is a legally constituted meeting of the Los Lunas Schools Board of Education.
Thank you very much. We're on item D, approval of the agenda. Mrs. Chavez, are there any changes or deletions to the agenda?
Yes, I would like to remove item E, approval of consent item. We do not have any consent items on the agenda this evening.
Thank you very much. I would stand for a motion regarding the approval of the agenda with considering Mrs. Chavez's recommendation.
So moved. Second.
Okay, Mr. Talley has moved, Mr. Bennett has seconded to approve the agenda as amended by Mrs. Chavez, specifically removing item E, approval of the consent items. Are there any discussion? Is there any discussion? Having no discussion, I will stand for the vote. Mr. Vickers,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Talley,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Motion passes 5-0 or 4-0, sorry. Mrs. Wolf?
Could I, with respect, could you also announce that, Ms. Moya is on?
I am happy to announce. Thank you very much for that. For the public's benefit and to make sure that the record is correct, Mrs. Simoya is not in attendance this evening. So we have a quorum of the board with 4 members present. Thank you very much. We are on item F, presentation of approval of the budget. Let's see, Mrs. Chavez?
I would like to invite Mrs. Tracek to the podium to review our budget proposal.
Another budget presentation. Ready? So again, I'm going to go ahead and go through these that are reoccurring screens quickly. The fiscal year begins July 1st and ends June 30th. This happens every year. Must demonstrate public awareness, must be balanced. The PED has set our due date for May 12th at 8 a.m. and the budget must be approved by the PED prior to July 1st. Our timeline, we have gone through almost all of these. We are now to the second to the last, April 29th special board meeting. Hopefully it is the final budget. And our budget is due to the PED on May 12th. This includes many other funds, not just operational, at 8 a.m. Student enrollment, if you're comparing from last year to this year, it is almost no change, pretty much the same. We are down 1.25 of a student. Teacher cost index, this is where we look at comparing at a point in time. It happens every October. We look over 2 of our payrolls and we pick which one we want to submit. And it looks at the number of years our teachers have, the types of degrees they have, and then that is evaluated and compared. And there was a slight drop from last year to this year. at-risk index. That is a factor in the multiplying in the SEG. And there was a slight increase on that, but that being a multiple does make a nice difference to the SEG. History of the unit value, it has all the unit value. It's kind of, when you're looking at it, it's kind of a little bit difficult to compare because depending on what happened in certain times, like you can't tell that at one point, there used to be a textbook fund, and now the textbook fund is been put inside the SCG, so the unit value increases because of things that happen like that. So kind of hard to compare one year to another, but there is a nice increase from last year to this year. We went to 6,553 to a 6,801.35. Here shows the SEG comparison. So the units that used to calculate the SEG, I kind of show a comparison to kind of show you how we are going up over $8 million, how that came about. You can look at some of the areas are quite high, the increase from last year to this year, or from the current fiscal year that we're in to the fiscal year we're talking about the budget for next year. So the two columns, there's a fiscal 25, 26, and then the variance. The very first one, that is that where you had the student numbers. The student numbers, there's actually a drop of 1.25 of a student. And I'm not sure if anyone's new here, but I kind of mentioned, because I'm wondering, people are probably wondering how you have a 0.25 of a student. And that is because this is an average number, because we're comparing 80th, we're using 80th and 120th days. And the DD preschool that we have, the preschool that is in the SEG, a student is only counted as a half a student because they are only here half a day. So you can see, even though we have in our total membership units, we have a large increase from one year to the next, and that is because the change in the factor that they made for the secondary students. And I will show you that in a little better detail on another slide. So another area, so then that the adjusted MEM units is quite a bit higher. Also, we have an increase in special education. Some of these other ones are smaller. The at-risk index, there was also, not only did we go up, but there was a change in the way they calculated it on the SCG. There was different, two sections kind of separated out. And that's why you see in 25, I have one number, and then in 26, there are two numbers. The difference is a nice increase to the SCG units. And,
So when you say they changed it, you mean the legislature changed?
yes.
Okay.
And so the PED 910B5, which is showing your calculation of the SCG, I received that recently and was able to look at that, add our calendar days into it, and then come up with what our SCG will be. And so that's what you see at the end. SCG was at 102 in the current fiscal year we're in, and it is going up to 110. So it's an increase of over 8 million. Okay, so here kind of shows you how did we lose 1.5 of a student, yet our membership numbers have increased greatly. And that is because you can see we total up our students by grades, and then they are multiplied by a factor. So not all students are equal, and when it comes to the factoring. And you can see in the red, that is the factor that was used last fiscal year compared to this fiscal year that we're budgeting, that new fiscal year, all this secondary went to a 1.3, and it started at grade 6. So the biggest change is in the grade 6. If you look, it has more of a smaller number jumped up to the secondary numbers. So all of that multiplied by the increase of the factors multiplied by the number of students in those grades added to our units. Okay, and here I have our estimated revenue calculation. This is operational revenue. This is every revenue that we are using. So if you look in the estimated, that is how I'm estimating we are going to end this year. Some numbers I know exactly, the SEG has been finalized. So that number that you see is exactly what we will receive, but we don't have all the payments yet. We have a couple months to go. And then all the other ones, there are some revenues that received that weren't budgeted for. So those are a nice increase to the reserves. Then you look at the next column is what I'm proposing to estimate the revenue to be. And so, so each of the different funds have the estimated amount in there, and then the next column is the variance of what's what I'm budgeting for now versus what we have happening this fiscal year. And you can see the largest change is in that SEG number. And I should have pointed out, I think we discussed in the workshop, I mentioned that a lot of those numbers are always conservative. I don't want to budget for something that is not going to happen. Okay, current information, all employees will receive at least a 4% raise.
Mrs.
Met-
Tracek, if I can interject really quickly on that one. So we are providing the information that all employees will receive at least a 4% raise. We are also looking at our administrators and their salaries. We have come to a point with our salaries because we are very competitive with our teacher salaries. Our teachers are quickly, level 3 teachers are quickly approaching the salaries for some of our administrators. And when you look at the compaction that's occurred, because we must follow the mandates that come from the sessions from Santa Fe, that has now caught up, and many of our employees who would at one point consider to become an administrator have chosen to remain as a teacher because they are making more money in the classroom than they are leading the school. So we have accounted to provide that support to all of our administrators so that we are competitive, and that's why we have at least a 4% raise, because some of our employees will receive higher in the administrative realm. And if we do not do something soon, this will continue. And we have already had a number of administrators who have left administration and returned back to teaching because of the salary differential.
Thank you
So
for
I
clarifying that.
did want to provide that information.
I appreciate that you clarified that. Thank you.
Okay, medical insurance increase 9.95% for both the employee and the employer. It's estimated to cost $700,000. That number is possibly more for the district in the whole, not just operational. Dental insurance increased 4% for both the employee and the employer. It's estimated to cost $15,000. The risk insurance increase is estimated to cost $400,000. And the nurse's salary schedules will go to a 3-tier system like the teacher salary schedules. And just wanting to make sure everyone knows that this is moving, trying to make nurses onto a teacher salary schedule might be a little weird at first. But to let everyone know that the nurses would be held at a safe harmless. So some of them will benefit for it. They might receive more, but ones, if they go back on the level, let's say on, the salary schedule, they will still have that 4% raise, from what they're making this year. So no, they will be held safe harmless. We won't have anyone making less than what they did this year. This goes over the insurance increases versus the raises, kind of showing you the structure that we are under right now with the 3-tier system and the different percentages and where those ranges of salaries are and what they are paying and what the increase would be. The bright yellow area kind of shows a little scenario showing how someone who is in the tier towards the end of the tier, receiving a raise might bump them into the next tier. And then, which makes their percentage that the district is paying decrease, which then some of those employees would be actually receiving less pay in the next year. The very bottom kind of shows how the 9.9%, excuse me, is an increase to both the employer and the employee and the employer. Okay, here are some options in the medical insurance, because when we looked at that percentage increase in insurance and the increase in salaries, we noticed that we have 29 employees that would be making less in the new year because they move from one tier to the other. And so because of that, we had looked into some options to try and counteract that problem. And some of the first ones we have there are, we have the 80-20, or is that the 70-30? That the 70-30, and that option would be a $800 and almost $50,000 increase to the budget. On the, also, if we all employees were offered the 20-80 split, that would cost the $1.2 million in just the people that are enrolled at this point. No changes. Option C is going, changing the percentages of the tiers. So instead of, we would still have our 80-20, still in the same dollar ranges the same, but instead of jumping from the 20-80 to the 30-70, instead we would go from the to 25-75, and then the next tier would be the 35-65. That would cost $352,000, and we would actually still have 3 employees that would be what we call upside down, making less in the next fiscal year. Option D is expanding the brackets, and that comes at a cost of $163,000. The last 2 options this year are not cutting into the reserves this year. I'm not sure if option C would cut into the reserves in the future, but option D is not cutting into the reserves at all. Okay, some considerations for possible FTE additions. We have 1 FTE for a buyer based off of an audit finding, 1 FTE for a warehouse worker due to increase in warehouse needs, 1 FTE IT focused on security systems such as alarms and access control, 1 FTE for an elementary band teacher instructor due to the increase in music programs, and 2 FTEs for athletic activity sponsors growing in the activity and athletic programs in place of stipends as, from the gymnaster and the athletic coordinators. In the workshop, someone had asked kind of how much this would cost, and I have that approximately at $513,000 for those. And go ahead and go back. I did want to mention part of the last two in the SCG. There were, with that factor change was meant to kind of put a little bit more funds in the secondary areas. And like the 1 FTE for the elementary band teacher is allowing, even though it's an elementary, it is freeing up a secondary band teacher from having to leave their site and go teach at elementaries. So this is an effort to actually keep the secondary teachers in the secondary area and allow for still being able to have a music programs in the elementaries and be able to support the secondary the way the FTE calculation has wanted.
In addition, we'd be looking at adding or the return of choir back to our high schools. And we would start at Valencia High School. And then we would be looking at starting a mariachi program for Los Angeles High School. It started as an after-school program sponsored by one of the music instructors that would then turn into a class. But we do want to see an increase in our music programs. Our band programs at our middle schools and then into our high schools are growing. And the interest is there from our students.
So when you talk about the choir at VHS, would that also be an after-school program? or
That
would
will be during the
full
day.
position
That would be during the day.
During the day, so.
It will be an
regular course.
actual class, correct? And with the addition of this elementary band instructor, that will help us offer that course because one of those instructors would be able to remain at Valencia High School instead of going to a middle school or an elementary school to teach a band course at either of those campuses.
But the mariachi at Los Angeles High School would be offered kind of as a pilot program, it sounds to me like, as an after-school program, so paid for by a stipend?
Correct. And we would start as a after-school program to see the interest. I'm sorry, Ms. Montano? Oh, that's right. Yes, so with that high school program, we would be able to start at 2:30 instead of 3:30 because that instructor would be at the secondary site. And so the students would be able to start that after-school program right after school with this additional instructor. Because of the schedule, they would not have to be going to the elementary schools to teach band.
Okay.
And we do want to see what the interest is. We do have an instructor who's very excited about the program.
Thank you for the clarification.
And also in the very last one, the last 2 FTEs are also supporting the more secondary school sites. Okay, also some considerations, just kind of noting that this year, the budget continues to almost eliminate out-of-state travel, only being used in special circumstances. And when, or, if something had to be done and in-state travel is not possible. We continued with the positions that were moved last year to other funds to stay in those other funds. We continue with the reduction of the take-home vehicles. Cuts to the positions that were made last year remain. And this budget was created and balanced using the fiscal 26 revenue that was calculated and does not at this point calculate to have any cuts into the cash reserves. The current fiscal year appeared to possibly cut into cash reserves, and I just want to make sure everyone's aware that that has not happened and is not expected to happen.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Sure.
I asked a lot about that prior. This is what I should have asked. So prior to the 24-25 school year, do you have the number what the cash reserve was then?
They were like
Rough number.
20, it was over
20,
21 million.
Okay. And now we're projected before the 25-26 school year. Do you have a projection of what cash reserves are gonna be?
We're starting at 30 million, so
30.
go back to 10.
So that.
There was an increase of 10 million roughly in
We,
cash reserve
last, mhm.
as opposed to what we potentially thought we might have a.
Yeah, we
Okay.
were comfortable with the 21.
Okay.
And so last year was a very bountiful year for us.
So that was what year that we had 21?
That was
prior.
in end of last year, not the fiscal year we're in now, last year.
23-24 fiscal year
Right.
was 21 million.
Mm-hmm. 21,000,005,
Was
I
that-
believe.
Because of leftover, or we were able to put so many other things on ESSER funds or ARP funds, so that's where we were able to kind of squirrel away some money
Yes.
Yes.
to help us get, okay.
It
Do-
was,
Do we have an estimate? All goes as planned and everything works out, you know, what our cash reserves will be prior to the 26-27 school year?
for the 26.
So the upcoming, so like,
Oh,
we had 21, now we're at 30. What are we projecting? If all the budgeting goes well,
would still stay at the 30.
we'd still say at 30.
Because,
Okay.
yes,
No projected increase or decrease, just,
Unless the unit value increases
Okay.
at mid-year.
yeah, that's true.
all right,
We-
thank you.
With this, most of the time, the unit value does go up from the initial. Last year it stayed constant, but if you remember, we started in the beginning of the budget season with a unit value and then they increased it. And so I don't know if they, usually when they do set the initial, they reserve a portion and then you get your final. And so it does go up because they reserve something, so I'm not sure when they changed it last year on us, they went to that non-reserved number. So, and that's why it didn't change from the initial to the final last year. So it's possible that if the unit value goes up at the end of the year, then yes, you
We could have more
could-
cash reserve.
right.
Thank you.
If I finished. Okay, yes, I do. Okay, here I have the budget by function. You can see the account number and then the description of what that function means. And the amount that I'm budgeting this year. The next column has the percentage for this year. And then the comparison for last year's percentage of what was budgeted. And so you can see the greatest amount is always in the direct instruction. And this is what the by function looks like visually on a pie chart. And that large area is the 1000 function. Some, we had provided, just so you have an idea, the FTEs operational versus other, this is where we're at, with our FTEs at this point. Showing what we have in operational and all the other things by categories.
So I'd like to pause here a moment. Can we go back to slide 16? We had an increase on the support services students function from 10.52% to 11.57. What is your denominator for these percentages for fiscal year 25? Is it, are we using the budget amount for?
So it's always gonna be how much like, for example, the first one, how much is in the 1000 function, how much I budgeted versus the total budget.
Okay.
And that's the same last year. So they've always been done in that manner. So sometimes you're like, if you have something that's a fixed number, it's going to be a little different when your total budget goes up.
So I noticed that we had decreases in support services for students, support services for instruction, and support services for general administration. Why do we have those decreases?
So in the support student services in the second one, the 2100, that one last year, we had moved some social workers out of the operational fund into other funds. And at the point when the budget was done, I wasn't exactly sure how many were gonna be, of the other funds would be able to afford to pick them up. And it wasn't, by the time I'm doing the operational fund, when things are not concrete, already been approved by others, it stays in the budget, in the operational budget until we know for sure that's not gonna happen. So, and that might be, depending on how confident you feel, you put it in there, whether it's cash reserves or not. So luckily, the other funds were able to handle, that movement of, and so that was very beneficial to operational. So in that case, it's because of that, because last year they were budgeted in there and we're not using them, so it was a benefit to the operation. So that, for that reason, that one went down. In the 2200, there was a change in the way professional development is coded, and no longer able to be in the 1000. I wasn't sure how much Title II at that point was going to be able to take of tuition reimbursements. And nothing, everything wasn't finalized, and so a lot of money was put into that just because the movement of all kinds of professional development and when I say professional development, it also includes the tuition reimbursement is a big component of that. And so I had conservatively overput budget estimated for that, and that didn't end up happening, so. And that also is kind of a smaller area, and so depending on what types of changes are made and when your salary, when your bottom line denominator goes up so high, that does have an effect on the percentages also. And so some of that is that probably just because I've put more in the cash reserves, because we have more cash reserves, so that there's a larger portion in this year to the last year. So you see you've seen increase in that, and you still have an overall a larger denominator. So some of the other functions go down because of that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here are some of the other funds. These are special services funds. Title VI, 25184, the salaries and benefits for high school Native American liaison, and the percentage of the director of special programs. This, when it comes to the special services slides, those show you what the budget is the current year and not next fiscal year. The current budget is 97,709. It's federally funded based on the number of 506 forms on file. And it's a 3-part grant applied for each year by the Director of Special Programs. Impact Aid at Indian Education 25147, salaries and benefits of the middle school liaison, field trips, backpack supplies for the project. In the current fiscal year we're in, they received 176,807. It's federally funded based on the number of students who live in the Pueblo of Isleta. And it is also applied for by the Director of Special Programs each year. The New Mexico pre-K, I think at the workshop we had mentioned, that there was in the SCG, the DD pre-K, and then there's this New Mexico pre-K. So that's, Fund 27149 is a separate fund that pays for those pre-K students.
So I do want to add a few about the membership, because there is probably some questions to say, well, the membership may look different than student enrollment trends. So if you look at slide 4, if you look at the membership compared to student enrollment, we do have to count our New Mexico pre-K students in a different category. So when you look at the totality of our student population compared to the student membership for funding for operational purposes, there is a difference. When you add the number of New Mexico pre-K students to this line graph, the number does increase. But we do not add those students to the operational budget. When you look at the number of pre-K students across the board, they're at all of our elementary schools. There's at least 20 students per program. And some of our programs, some of our schools have more than one program. So you're looking at almost close to another 280 students.
Yes, so anytime I do this, this is, for the SLP purposes. So I'm telling you with students in the SEG only.
So when we say we have almost 8,300 students, we do count our New Mexico pre-K students in that total population count, but they are not counted in the membership count for operational. So I just wanted to clarify that, because there may be some questions. Well, I always hear you're at 8,300 or so, 8,250. We do count our pre-K students because they're part of our schools, but they are in a different funding category. New Mexico pre-K.
So that goes along with slide 9, where we have pre-K at 70.5 membership. That is only for SEG. That is not including New Mexico pre-K at least 20 times 8 schools, correct?
10.
Or 10, okay. 10,
Yes.
okay. Good correction, thank you.
But I just wanted to clarify that, because there's people who say, well, I thought you were at 8,300, but your slides are only showing this number of students. That's because those are who are funded through operational purposes.
And since it is separate, that is, why they, in this fund, they will pay for the students to be transported to school. And so when it talks about bus drivers and bus assistants in this, in the first paragraph there, that is why. It also pays for the classroom supplies, furniture, field trips, professional development, substitutes, and to and from transportation. The current fiscal year, they have received 2,686,400. And it is a state funded grant. It is applied for by the Director of Special Programs. It is on a grant cycle until 2027. And the next one, 24113 McKinney-Vento. This fund pays for salaries and benefits of a parent liaison and supplies. The current school year, we received 30,000, and it is a flow through state grant. Federal, but flows through the state and is applied for by the Director's Support Services, currently in the first year of a 3-year grant cycle. Okay, idea B 24106, page 1. It mentions that we pay salaries, curriculum for the students with special needs, equipment materials for students with special needs. And the budget for the current fiscal year that we're in is $3,255,332. And the page 2 kind of is more detailed into the salaries. See the salaries that are being paid out of that fund. Medicaid 25153. This is Medicaid school-based services, not the Medicaid that others usually are aware of. It is reimbursed for students on an IEP. who receive occupational therapy, speech therapy, audiology, speech therapy, nursing services, and mental health services. So it's the ancillary staff, materials and supplies, their salaries and benefits, and does not impact families' Medicaid. And the budget, for this fiscal year is, 5,254,422.
Are those services available to any child in the community, whether they're enrolled in schools or not?
So as part of Idea B, we do have the child find component. So child find is a responsibility that we have to identify any students in the community that may need services. So if they are not enrolled in school, we do have to provide support for students who are homeschooled or who are enrolled in a private school. There's a designated amount of funding that we have to appropriate every year. Some years they do, those funds are used and other years they are not. It depends on if the families bring their students in. So we do have to make sure that we have that advertised. So it is on our district website and we do share that through all our daycares as well.
So the funding fluctuates with the number of kids suspended.
Correct. And they can be attending a private school outside of the district, but if they live within the district boundaries, then it becomes our child find duty to evaluate and provide services.
Okay, there are some other funds. These are the ones that are under curriculum instruction and accountability. Okay, 24101, Title I, salaries, they are partial salaries for 12 certified employees, partial salaries for 2 classified employees, and partial salaries for 4 administrators. It purchases supplies, materials, and resources specific to math and ELA. Pays for professional development and family, parent and family engagement. And the amount at the end there is the amount that we will be receiving. This year's application has already been, the amount has already been given. Title II, 24154, this pays salaries, partial salaries for 12 certified employees, tuition reimbursements for teachers, principals, and assistant principals. So the tuition reimbursement when it comes to teachers, principals, and assistant principals, depending on the classes they take, it goes through an approval process. And if it can be coded to Title II, it is. All other tuition reimbursement, operational picks up everything other than those. And sometimes, even though it may be a teacher, if it's not a class that they approve, then operational pays for that tuition.
What's an example of a class that would not be approved under Title II?
Sometimes it's really crazy because it's like cannot explain why they wouldn't pay for something like that. So I don't know if you're better off to some of the.
Madam President, members of the board, it's usually classes that have to fall under education that Title II would be paying for.
Okay, so if it were pedagogy, math
Absolutely.
pedagogy,
Yeah,
or
that would-
classroom management,
Yes.
or fundamentals of education law.
Yeah. And it has to be in an approved program, an educational program.
Okay, so I
So-
couldn't just go in and pick and choose and take one. It would have to say that I'm working towards for dossier, for instance, to improve for dossier.
Absolutely.
And-
Or your master's program in curriculum or
But if
administration.
I were looking for a master's in chemistry, it wouldn't necessarily be paying for my 500 level class of organic too.
Exactly.
But that possibly could come out of the operational fund.
Yes,
For tuition reimbursement.
yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
And there is a process that we must complete so that there's a pre-approval process That way there's not any disappointment at the end for an employee who is expecting a reimbursement. So we have a pre-approval process to say, yes, this is an approved course. And if it's not approved, then they may need to provide more justification, but we do not want to give anybody a false sense of hope that it is going to be reimbursed. So there is a very streamlined process, and I appreciate the process.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
This also pays for new teacher induction, including stipends for mentees and mentors, recruitment. And the allocation that they're receiving this year is $333,522. Title III 24153 pays for professional development, parent and family engagement, materials and resources in English tailored specifically to English language learners. The allocation we're receiving is $91,360. Title IV 24189, salaries of 2 certified employees, materials and resources specific to STEM, music, art, and AP courses. Student activities tied to health and safety, professional development, and they are receiving $148,371. And that is it, so. Any questions?
I have a question if no one else is gonna. jump on
Jump
it.
in.
So on page 14, there's considerations for the upcoming year for some FTE additions. A buyer based off of audit finding, we had one audit finding, is that?
The audit finding that we had on procurement, we used a state contract, and the contract said that there would not be a markup on materials. And so they tell us in the contract how much labor will be depending on what type of employee, and then no markup on materials. We're given a quote, and before we start the project, get our POs in place on that. But we are expected to actually let the vendor know that we need to see their copies of their invoices for all the parts that they charged us for, and to make sure that there's no markup on that. So the one audit finding that we had, it was, over 50 categories that we need to sit there and go through. And so it needs someone who understands contracts, who can do that extra work. Our procurement area is already very stressed at the level that adding something like that, because that's just one item. There are so many times we do use state agreements, different contracts that need to be reviewed. And we already have, like, our business office already, any extra that we can do in places, we're already there. I mean, we have someone who drives a bus constantly, quite often, almost every day. I have someone that watches the furniture and makes sure each school is working with the school sites. I have someone who does our auction to help bring in money. There are all kinds of other things that we're doing in the business office that are not just business, that help the overall school sites and help our overall bottom line. And it's gonna take someone that understands reading contracts and knowing exactly where that's at. It's not something I'm really, the audit finding, we got it because we didn't do that step of comparing. However, it came out just fine. They did bill us the right amount. And so, are we watchdogging something that may be okay? And so, but it was something we fought and we lost. And I just don't know how I can add to that area for people to know procurement, know how to read contracts, and do that legwork is gonna be so time consuming when that area is already way stressed, so.
And I have also a question on page 14 for that one FD of focus security systems such as fire alarms and access control. I'm a little concerned there because if we're talking bots and stuff, I don't know if we need a whole IT person, not more just the system to produce them and keep track of them. And I understand the fire alarm system, but being on finance the last couple of years, it seems like we've had a different company come in that's been corrected. I know we have one person now that's addressing it, but I guess I don't know, it'd be nice to see the workload, the work orders, what's actually getting accomplished, what's being not done. How much of this gets done to the maintenance department?
And I left that in there, and that one's a questionable FTE if the need arises, so that is something that's being considered. Where are we at? We know it looks like there are, our fire alarm system is getting to a point where a lot of work needs to be done. And it also would be nice to have someone training under the one person that we have so not just one person is the one doing all that. We have someone hopefully learning under that person. But those are considerations. Will we need it? It's being put in here in case it happens. Let's say the fire marshal says,
Right.
we need to do you need to do 4 schools and they need to be done, So that's in there just in case, but that is something that's being evaluated, whether it's needed or not.
Yeah,
But
but that's something that also could be brought back to the board and that we need to provide a new position.
So you're saying maybe we don't need this position now, but it could be a bar later on.
Right.
After a.
Correct. Correct. It's a consideration to say that this is possibly something that we would look at based on the work orders, workload, and evaluation of the position.
Right, because that person also to be trained, is going to all of a sudden slide into a supervisor or lead position, and then that's also not going to be the cost of that person, but now an additional increase of that other person's pay, correct?
if that person, I'm sorry, if the
If
person left.
That one person becomes the trainer or the lead
Oh.
guy.
No, there wasn't any. It was more of a,
Okay.
it was more of a equal type.
I just think that can be exactly like I said, maybe a far right.
So I'm
I'm
gonna,
thinking that person probably is not gonna have as much experience as the other person, so they would not be making as much, but that other person would still stay where they're at.
so I wanna correct my understanding and then I'll also correct the public record. In the work session, I specifically asked if these FTEs were already included in the budget that was proposed, and we were told yes.
Yes.
So that meant it was already anticipated that this FTE for security systems for fire alarms and access is planned. We hadn't had it presented that it was not planned, but that, and to go along with that, board policy requires that any new positions, we get to see a job description. So I'm wondering, which is it now? Are we planning on it and it's in the budget? And if we accept the budget as it's been presented tonight, then that means the board has essentially assumed the responsibility of an additional FTE? Or is this something the administration is asking the board to consider? We do have the monies, but at some point, the administration would bring through a bar approval for the position. Which is it?
The one you just said, the last one.
So if this board approves this budget this evening, we're not going to see an announcement of this position because we have no input on personnel.
Correct.
That's out of our swim lane, but we would not see an announcement of this position before it came to the board through the finance agenda. Is that what I'm understanding?
I'm not sure.
Because if it's a bar, that goes through finance.
Right.
Is that what I'm understanding? Is
Yes.
that what you
if
guys are
it-
understanding? I mean,
So
I'm a little
my
confused.
understanding was that these 6 positions one, two, three, four, 6 positions were accounted for in the budget, and if the budget was approved, that these positions would be funded. That was my understanding.
They
So-
would be available if the superintendent
Correct.
ch-
So the
chooses
alloc-
to
So
fill them.
before these were open for a rec out for someone, to fill the spot, we would have to approve. the addition.
Not if we approve
No.
the budget.
Not the
No,
budget.
that's not in there.
Right,
So-
so,
There's your,
so they would be allocated inside the budget. So
Okay.
that way it would be an allocation. So it wouldn't be coming to you after the fact and saying, surprise, we added 6 new FTEs.
this is how you're informing us that you're,
The consideration is there. So we're still looking to see what the workload is going to be. We may not fill these positions either. There may not be interest in these positions. That's always a possibility. And based on your questions, we would look at work orders, work requirements, what needs to be filled, what hasn't been filled, what is a necessity, but we are putting this up for consideration because they are new FTEs.
that answer.
It does, and it makes me less comfortable because if we approve the budget, that means the board washes their hands of this topic. And that means that we're not evaluating, or we could stop evaluating and a position could be immediately put into place. So is that your concern?
Yes.
Bennett?
Yes.
That's my concern.
It
Okay.
seems,
Mr. Vickers?
it seems to me that it's prudent to look at anticipated needs
Sure.
for the coming year and to budget, set aside money
Sure.
if
Sure.
we follow through. It may be that they can't follow through because they can't find somebody or they've determined the need isn't as severe as they thought, but to plan it in advance and include it in a budget seems like that makes a lot of sense to do that rather than waiting and saying, oh, we have this big need, we're gonna have to find money somewhere to pay for this person.
And that is a consideration.
Okay, thank you.
So I have more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead, I'm
on the
so sorry.
page. Yeah, no, I was making sure you were done with yours. If we fund these positions, could they at a later time be changed to something else? Like in the org chart, moved around somehow?
Sure could.
Because-
Because right
that-
now, we do not have a board policy that the board approves the organizational chart.
So that's another potential concern. It says here, a buyer and a warehouse worker and all these things that I have everybody confidence that that's what they're meant for. But at a later time, it could be used for something different
That is correct.
that we would have no purview over, I guess. The second thing, the 2FT athletic activity sponsors, would that be one at each high school? Was that the intent of those?
So we would
And-
be looking, yes, correct. And they would also support the middle schools.
Okay, and is this something that has been done in other districts, or is this something that's new for us? Is there a precedence for this?
This has been done in other districts similar to our size.
Okay,
And these are not administrative positions.
thank you.
And if you notice, it also says activity. So it's athletics and activities. So there are numerous activities and athletics at all of those 4 schools.
So that would be one person who may be overseeing a large number of activities
And athletics.
and athletics.
But they would still be overseen by Mr. Seitz's department and under his supervision as far as supporting the athletics and activities. So there still would be oversight at the district level as well as with our interim athletic director, Mr. Hayes. Currently with athletics and activities, if you are at any of our high schools, our comprehensive high schools, there are numerous activities that occur throughout the year. And these positions do require a great amount of time. And at our middle schools, we have had a very hard time covering the athletic coordinator that was allocated for both schools, both middle schools. It's hard to find people to do those positions in addition to their regular work schedule and duties. And it would assist us with finding those sponsors, those coaches that does come into question, why do we not have a program at this school and we have a program at the other school? And this year we have seen an increase in interest in coaching staff at our middle schools, which I think that is a good thing for middle school students. They need to be involved in the schools. And one of the big responsibilities that I will be looking at is an increase in school spirit, an increase in community involvement. So I have a hard time when I go to events and our community does not stand up for fight songs. They do not know our fight song. I know that sounds simplistic in nature. However, that does build upon community spirit and school spirit. I hear a fight song, whether it's from my alma maters, and I stand up immediately because that was how we grew up, whether it's at the high school or collegiate level. It's a sense of pride.
Well, and from my previous experience, by the time you have the number of activities on a campus, after-school activities that occur, there is so much that happens. There is so much. So one person knowing everything that's happening between activities and athletics and where to direct parents to the what room versus the gym, or who should be on campus, who shouldn't be on campus, who's properly licensed, who's not properly licensed, et cetera, is also a safety and security concern. So I know personally, I am very much in favor of those positions for the audit finding. We want to decrease audit findings as much as possible. Warehouse worker with the warehouse needs, especially since we provide school supplies for schools, so we don't have to be asking parents to provide Kleenex and other things. That's a lot of work. And the three positions that go back to providing program for students, I do hear Mr. Bennett's concern about if we need an additional person for fire alarms and access controls. I'm concerned about that one. So yes, and I hear Mr. Vickers' caution. It is prudent to budget. But budgeting it and do we need it are two separate things. I mean, I think that that's also prudent is the evaluation process, so.
I just would like to say one other thing about the warehouse. I was there yesterday and I typically, beginning of the year, you receive a large amount of shipments, items that come in. I was there yesterday and it's a machine, and the amount of boxes and packages, et cetera, that are received every single day, it's a lot to organize and ensure that it gets to our school sites. And our team works effortlessly, but they are short-staffed. When you look at the amount of workload that is required of the the warehouse, and the responsibility to deliver those items in a timely manner to get to our students, I commend our employees. That warehouse they were at full capacity yesterday, and I could see it immediately when I walked in where the need is.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Talley, other questions on this slide?
I think I'm done.
You betcha. I think we're on slide 15. Is that where we're at?
We were just,
Oh, are we
for
done?
questions,
Are
we
we done?
finished,
Oh,
but we were
these
just.
are-
Depends on what your question is.
Yes, this is fascinating. Sorry, you're getting a little punch drunk. Okay, I'm so sorry. Mr. Bennett, questions?
Yeah, just about the insurance I know we've discussed it a lot, but you say that 163 for expanding the brackets comes out of where? It doesn't come out of our reserves, right?
Not out of the reserves, no. We had some extra money in
we
the
could-
revenue that we had,
We could expand the brackets in the insurance part.
right?
I mean, it'd be nice to go
I
the other
think
route. I know
the
it's pretty expensive.
option C would zero, pretty much zero us out, and give or take, you can never tell exactly sure, because you don't know what type of employees are gonna come in, what level, and when you change.
Yeah, and I know we wanted to probably give it better, 20/80 type thing, but then from our work session, it can go from 1.2 2 to 2.4, just depends how many people jump on the bandwagon.
And if you're.
And like you
cutting-
said, baby
if you're-
steps, it might be good just to expand the brackets.
If you're cutting in this year, you are going to cut in every year
Right.
to your cash reserves. So I know cash reserves are a concern of yours. And so it would be wonderful if we could provide the 80-20, but that would be costly.
Yeah.
I'm sure it would cost more than the estimate there. And it would continue every year, and every year that it goes up, it would be a problem.
Are there any other questions before I provide a summary from our work session and then we move on with a possible motion to approve the budget? Mr. Vickers, did you have any other questions or concerns that you want to address just as part of her presentation while she's here?
Just a little clarification on the insurance. Your budget that you're asking us to approve includes that last option on shifting the bracket. So we don't have to separately approve that provision. It's already in there.
It's in there. So
Good question.
if you were to choose some other option, then like say you chose the 1.2, I'm gonna, in my columns of what I'm paying for with our current revenue versus what we're paying for, or what I'm budgeting with for our cash reserves, I would have to move some of that cost out of the cash reserves into
Okay, so just, we approve the budget, it's that level, the shifting of the brackets.
Ben.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? Okay, so just for the public's record, previous to the board meeting, we did have a work session where we had an opportunity to also engage in other discussion. No decisions are made in work sessions. So some things that came up that I wanted to make sure that the public is aware of is that at the April 22nd, 2025 presentation to NEA, both Mr. Bennett and I sat in on those presentations. We had approximately 15 people in attendance. I did not capture in my notes any questions directed, but we did have lots of very positive comments about how transparent you and your staff are in communicating the budget and the process and capturing school-based needs and trying to incorporate that. In terms of the public hearing parent advisory, we had one lone wolf, Mr. Ricky, attend. He was half in on the NEA and then sat with Mrs. Tracek, and I don't know, Mr. Ricky, if you asked questions or did not ask questions or whatnot, but consideration of our employees' time and a little bit of their mental health. I called the meeting and sent everybody home so staff could get home at a reasonable hour since Mr. Ricky was in attendance and he was willing to come back today, as well as our Valencia County news reporter was willing to come back today, as opposed to holding for another 45 to 50 minutes. In terms of questions that came up through the work session on the different slides, some of these questions have already been answered. And we've, of course, raised some new questions. For instance, on slide 10, Mr. Talley asked for clarification of our historical cash balance so that we could have a better perspective. In the NEA presentation, I did raise the concerns associated with these astronomical increases in our risk insurance. Increases estimated to be $400,000, and that we do need to, the board and the administration need to jointly work at reducing those things that could be considered risky and in areas that we've caused our risk insurance to have those kinds of increases in one of those identified areas. Hence, it included in the slide, and if I can find the slide, I'll do it really quickly. of reducing the number of vehicles that are taken home every single night. We did talk about in the work session about what the nurse's salary schedule will be changed to a three-year tier system could look like. Mrs. Tracy, in this presentation, just did talk about nurses will be held harmless, and so no employee will make less. And Mr. Size did estimate for the board that nurses' salaries range between 59,000 and about 80,000. It's not precise, it was from his recall. So that we know that those adjustments will still kind of fall in those bands. When we did start talking on slide 13, the options for medical insurance, the board has been specifically very concerned about the rising costs of medical insurance and what that is potentially doing to our employees. So over the course of the budget presentations, the board has asked from the administration to please provide different options so that we could curtail the harm that is coming to employees. So we appreciate it, and we expressed our appreciation to the administration, and specifically Mrs. Tracek and her staff, for going through the legwork to provide the different options. And again, some of the different options that the board has asked to look at have been for every employee, going to an 80-20 option where the employer, the district pays 80% and the employee pays 20%. If the board were to adopt a budget specifically requesting that that particular board or that budget option be included, that would be at a minimum an estimated increase to the budget of $1.2 million, which would mean that we would have to cut into our reserves. But as Mrs. Tracek was very fair to note for the board's consideration, that we have many staff over on federal funds, and if the federal funds could not accommodate this particular budget increase, that those staff members' increases to their medical care costs would have to come to the operational. Did I say that correctly?
Correct.
Thank you very much.
Unless-
So, and because it would be a pretty nice little benefit, Mrs. Tracek has cautioned the board that it would be easily and probably anticipated that we would have many more staff choose to take the option for medical insurance, which we don't have an estimation of. So again, that minimum cut or that minimum interference into the reserve would be projected to be quite a bit higher than the 1.2. The third option was by expanding the brackets to be 80-20 for those employees making less than 59,000. And then the next bracket would be 75-25, where the employer pays 75%, the employee would pay 25%. That would be an increase of 5% over what is currently in place, which is a 70-30 breakdown or cost sharing. Same thing for those employees in the highest salary income, going from a 60-40 option to a 65-35% option. The projection is an increase of $452,000 that we could probably afford from the proposed budget for the fiscal year 25-26. But Mrs. Tracek is cautioning the board that if the board chose that option at this time, it would definitely pose potential future cuts that would cost, or that would cause the board to rely on the reserve to fund. And the last option is option D, where we would expand the brackets. Instead of $0 to $50,000, we would expand the bracket from $0 to $55,000. Is that correct? And instead of it being 50,000 to 60,000, it would be, if we chose option D, it would be 55 to 65,000. And instead of it being 60,000 and up or higher in salaries, we would expand the bracket to be 65 and up. But that would still, if the board chose option D, that would be an increase that is already estimated in the proposed budget of $163,000. with some wiggle room, so we understand that those are estimated costs. But that would be at the 80-20, 70-30, 60-40. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, and these numbers are based on current enrollment.
Correct.
So of course, we do not know what next year, who's gonna take what. So we're estimating, but your best estimate is we could easily afford the 163,000 so that no employees would be harmed because of the forced increase to medical insurance.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. We have already gone over the questions that, these were new questions that came up on slide 14. A question on slide 15, because we moved many, so I'm going with the second bullet, continuing with the positions that were moved last year to other funds. So those were primarily federal funds. Have there been any monetary problems that we've run into with providing programs for any of those impacted students?
No.
Because we moved so many salaries over to those budgets.
No, there have not, and it has benefited students because we were able to keep our social workers.
Okay, thank you. very
And
much.
also with the EAs, the supports to help our students.
Okay, so there have been no problems with providing proper program.
Correct.
Okay, okay. The questions on 16 were addressed in the presentation, in the current board presentation, and there were no questions presented in slides 19 through 33. That is from my notes, just so that we have an accurate record. Is there any clarifications or additions from my notes the board members would like to make?
I just want to make
Sure.
one quick, so last year you said we had roughly 21 million in cash at the beginning of the year, which was just over 20% of the total budget. This year we're looking at 30 million in cash, which with the proposed budget is just over 20% of the budget. So I just wanted to make
That's good.
that just for people's knowledge that it's about a little bit over actually 21% of the budget. So for information,
Okay,
we're sitting about the same in percentage wise in cash reserve.
With the increase in our operational budget, yeah.
okay. So
It might be a handy thing to know or think about.
it's very good. Thank you for doing that rapid math. With the aid of technology provided for by the district.
That is correct.
There we go. Okay, so back on item F. I would stand for a motion regarding item F.
Dr. Rosowski,
Yes.
I would like to make a motion that we approve the budget as presented tonight with the following exceptions. I would like to propose that we go to option A, that is the 80-20, 70-30 option for insurance. That is roughly $900,000 that we would have to take from reserve, but that would take us, doing that would put us still above 20%. And as Ms. Tracy has pointed out in the past, anything over 20% may put us at risk for losing some of our cash reserve. So again, go with option A. And as well as I would like to go to 5 new FTEs as opposed to 6 FTEs. And with the option of later on having a bar after we have more information. So again, my motion is to approve the budget as presented with the exceptions of going to option A for insurance and 5 FTEs.
On clarification on the 5 FTEs, are we constrained to 1 FTE for the security not being added at this time?
Yes, sir.
I'm right. I'm just taking a few notes. Forgive me.
And Ms. Wolf, is that motion good? Okay.
Is there a second? I will second the motion for Mr. Talley so that we can move to discussion. Is there any discussion?
I know that what was budgeted was option B, the 163,000. I don't think that it is a high risk to this budget and even future budgets to go ahead and give that opportunity to, we have a lot of employees that would benefit from that and that would make it more equitable across the board. So that's my rationale for going to option A as opposed to option B.
So how, I want to make sure I understand this, that it would be for option A, it's 80-20, 70-30. So help me understand what that means. So I'm really clear.
Um, so that's more of a, that's a, one tier. And then the next tier, instead of going, where we have the, 30-70 is the second tier, we would also have it in the third tier. So
we'd
that
essentially
means
have
you'd have
two tiers
two
of-
tiers
Oh,
that are, so you just have either 80-20 for people that make up to 50,000, and then everyone else is in the 30-70. The only thing that I kind of wonder if someone would say that is benefiting the third tier, which is the higher paid people.
I think it's definitely benefiting the third tier.
It definitely is,
mean,
but.
And I think it also looks more attractive. What, where are most of our teachers? What pay bracket do they fall in?
Third one.
So we're putting more money in our teachers' pockets. As well as other personnel, but that's a pay raise that is kind of indirect.
Ms. Tracek, just for clarification on that, the option B, would we still have employees who were falling under that original option or original scenario that you proposed on slide 12, where they would make less because of the insurance increase?
No,
Then we would be okay?
we would not have, in the first two options, the only, those options, we would not have anyone making less if you're gonna be paying,
So under
bigger
option A,
percentage.
we would not have
Upside down.
right?
any upside
For
down.
the
I-
30,
It would be 0 to 60. Right,
Over 60. 37.
right.
Oh, so it would be,
So is that number representative here?
Mr. Castillo,
Yeah.
can you share your information? Sorry.
please go to the podium,
Yeah.
Mike, and anybody listening at home. Thank you.
So based on this calculation, it would be 0 to 60 would be column A, 80-20. Anybody over 60 would be the 70-30. So you wouldn't have the problem of people jumping brackets because of the increase.
There'd be no upside down.
Correct. Okay, correct. There would be those individuals that are currently in 80-20 that would stay in 80-20, but they wouldn't lose any money.
So we're not just benefiting the highest tier, we're also benefiting the lowest tier potentially. By no increase and the middle tier. Right.
Yeah,
Tiers all around.
thank you. I didn't understand that there was a bracket change there as well.
Right, that's why I just wanted to make sure it was clarified so
Yeah,
that there
thank
was
you.
complete understanding.
Yeah,
That's
thank
why
you.
we're here, is to be really clear. Is there any other questions or items for discussion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Vickers?
I think, Ms. Tracek has given us a warning that we could suddenly have a bunch of people jump in to the insurance because it would be cheaper for them than their spouse's insurance or whatever else insurance they have. And we would be looking at way more than that budget that's anticipated because that's just based on current enrollment.
correct.
And it's going to dig into reserves year after year. At some point, we're gonna have to back off and pull it back and not do it. And I don't like that option. I don't.
I'm not so, when option B, where it's 80-20, I think that's when you're really gonna, you would find a lot of people jumping in on that. The option A, I don't think quite as many would make that change, so.
But that's a projection.
That's, yeah, I can't
Right,
tell,
right.
because when it's offered, it's offered.
Right.
So it's
fair.
not, yeah, so what, everyone's individual situation, we can't. This is our best estimate of everyone currently enrolled.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Vickers.
So Mr. Vickers, just to comment on that, you're correct that eventually this may have to be pulled back. However, last year we dipped how many? 1.2, 1.5 million?
1 point, yeah, about.
And our
Plus
cash
or minus.
reserves still increased and we maintained at least 20% cash reserves. So you're correct, it's possible, but it's also possible that we continue to find other ways to save money. Ms. Tracy has done an excellent job of managing money and finding ways that we can still maintain or gain cash reserves.
Get more students.
Yeah, get more students.
We're trying. We really are.
Mr. Bennett, any questions for discussion? Any thoughts?
No, I just wanted clarity on that one FT was on the security systems and alarms that.
That would be removed from
Yes.
Mr. Bennett's motion, Mr. Talley's motion. Okay, I'm going to call for the vote. So to reiterate, Mr. Talley's motion is to approve the budget as presented with the additional, or with including the additional option, the insurance option A, which would require the board dip into our cash reserves and only allow 5 FTE, specifically removing the option of a safety and security person for fire alarms. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Calling for the vote.
Sorry.
I'm sorry,
So-
Mrs. Wolf?
My question to you is when you said you didn't talk about dipping into cash reserves, you talked about option A.
Correct.
So do you want both of them to put in the motion or just option A?
I think option A
I think the motion. should be-
implies,
Yeah, but for the minutes, the official minutes,
So I have
it might be
option A
best.
and 6.5 FTEs and specifically on what that was taken out. But his motion did not talk about dipping into cash reserves, just said option A.
I will amend my motion to include the verbiage of dipping into the cash reserves.
And I will second the amendment.
Thank you, sorry.
No, we're trying to, we're
Thank you.
practicing so hard on trying to get this right so that we're clear for the minutes and the public record. So I think it's very good that we're checking each other. Okay, I'm going to call for the vote. Mr. Talley, this was your motion. I'm going to start with you.
Yes.
Mr. Vickers,
No,
Mr. Bennett.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
No pressure.
I'm going with no. Motion fails, it's tied. Do we want to try another motion? Anybody want to try another motion?
Ms. Tracy would like us to do another motion.
I will offer this motion. I move that we approve the budget as proposed, including insurance option D, where we would, the board would expand the brackets from the 0 to 50, 50 to 60, and 60 up to 0 to 55, 55 to 65, 65 to 70, that amount being already included in the proposed budget and changing the proposed FTE from the 6 to the 5, specifically eliminating the proposed position for safety and security That's my motion.
I'll second for discussion.
Perfect. Is there any discussion? So for discussion, my thought is, and we brought this, or I think I raised this in the work session, correct me if I did not raise this. That this could be a baby step into addressing some concerns that Mr. Talley has raised, which are fair considerations. Mr. Talley has raised in previous board meetings and in board work sessions that our higher paid employees pay more for their medical insurance, which in many ways feels like a penalty to making more money and coming here, or choosing to work for the district. And if we are to get to the district's position of being premier, we should be moving towards equality of all employees. Is that a fair summary? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So this would be a baby step with talking about this next year, looking at ways that we could find the 2 million with other cost saving measures. We could put that in our strategic plan under effective and efficient systems, if that's if that's an accepted focus area, so that next year we definitely could move into an across the board 80-20 option by freezing potential positions and doing other cost saving measures. So I know that that's one of my considerations there. I am so concerned about the use of, or what we could do with our federal funds, especially the potential of 11.4 million of salaries sitting over on federal funds, and we haven't gotten to the federal government's fiscal year yet of October 1, so we just don't know what's going on. I do appreciate that Mr. Talley has done rapid math for us to help us see where last year's cash balance, we stayed at 20%. This year we have a slight increase to 21. Although last year we didn't have the concern of not knowing how these federal funds are going to come out. And we have a proposed new build for Ann Parish, plus hopes for an RGE complex moving forward. So those are my considerations for making that particular motion. Is there any discussion? Any other discussion?
So I appreciate the expanding the brackets. However, that does alleviate some of the costs for some.
Right.
And if it is a step, it's a baby step in the direction of equalizing, because the highest paid tier is still paying. There's no move for them. Whereas what I proposed is at least a bigger step in that direction. I think that people would benefit from it, and it is nice that there is nobody that's going to be left upside down, but it's not an improvement for most of the tier 3.
You're correct. It is not. You are correct. It is not. And it keeps the expanding brackets, keeps it at the current rates, 80-20, 70-30, and
Correct.
60-40. So that's, to be very clear, that's very fair. Is there any other discussion? I will call for the vote. It was my motion, so I will start, and I vote yes. Mr. Talley,
No.
Mr. Vickers,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Well, we need to get a budget done, and I think I'd like to go with the 80-20 myself personally, but I think if we go ahead and start off with baby steps, we got to start somewhere. So I'll go ahead and vote yes.
motion passes 3-0. Thank you for the discussion. Thank you, 3-1, I'm sorry. What number are we at? Can you do rapid math for me? So sorry, 3-1. Mrs. Tracick, I want to thank you and your staff. We've asked a lot of you guys this year, and we did it in a condensed time with other things going on. Mrs. Chavez, thank you for cooperating with the board and hearing all of our concerns and identifying staff to do these kinds of things. This budget presentation this year was so much more comprehensive and complete. We have federal funds in here. We have an understanding of federal funds. We didn't have that last year. We have an understanding, I think a better understanding of our employees' situation with insurance. And I think it's definitely on my radar now, what we need to do differently. And I think Mr. Talley has raised some extremely valid points. So as we sit on finance, we'll be looking for other cost-saving measures and asking critical questions about if we really need those things. Because I do think we need to find the 2 million. I think our employees matter. And I want to thank the board for engaging with the conversation and being good stewards of the information and participating fully. So thank you, everybody, for this particular conversation.
Dr. Osowski, I would like to also thank our team, and I would also like to note that we look at our funding every single day. That is at the top of everything that we do, and so we will continue to do that. That is a great responsibility, and we know how we do not consider that lightly.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are now on to item G. Item G is a tad bit wordy, and it may be confusing, and that was not the intention whatsoever. So I'm going to take a moment to explain item G and then move into some affirmations and then a recommendation for the next board meeting, regular board meeting. So the first part is affirming BOE adherence to and knowledge of board roles and responsibilities and limitations of the BOE. I did ask counsel for the board to help us write this language. And we have affirmed these recently in September 2024, when Mrs. Simoya was appointed to the board, and then we all recertified our board oath. But I want to publicly state these again, that the board will reaffirm that the board president has no authority or power individually, and that individual board members may exercise authority over the district affairs only by way of votes taken at a legal meeting of the board. The board does and will adhere to statutory limitations on school board authority. The board acknowledges and reaffirms that the superintendent has sole authority over personnel decisions. Also, that the board has received training at the most recent NMSBA Region 4 meeting, which was held April 9th, 2025, on the roles of the board and the superintendent. 4 of the 5 board members were in attendance at this training. That this board would never retaliate against any employee as a result of their participation in this nor any investigation. That the board reaffirms appropriate HR policies and will direct the superintendent to ensure consistent application and compliance with said policies. And the board reaffirms policies restricting board members from direct involvement in administrative matters. So that is the reaffirmation for the affirming BOE adherence to and knowledge of board roles and responsibilities as listed in item G. The second part is compliance with the Open Meetings Act. As the board is aware, the public may not be aware that an OMA complaint was submitted to the New Mexico Department of Justice, specifically the Government Counsel and Accountability Division, which is referred to as the GCA of the New Mexico Department of Justice. The complaint was filed by Dr. Ryan Dale Kettler. The first filing date was on July 16th, and it was resubmitted in November 2024. After a review of the evidence, the New Mexico Department of Justice issued their opinion or their decision in that I specifically violated the OMA Act, and have been directed, not directed, it was, the wording is, and I will read directly from the decision. The public body should include an agenda item that will allow the public body to provide a corrective statement to cure the OMA violations. The corrective statement should include, but is not limited to, a summary of the OMA violations outlined in this letter and a clear explanation of the actions and discussions that occurred outside of an open meeting regarding the PSA for legal services for Cuddy and McCarthy, which was discussed in June 2024 and then put into place in July 2024, which includes the individuals that I polled regarding the potential PSA, how and when these conversations occurred, the discussions between board members regarding a PSA with Cuddy and McCarthy at the law conference, and any and all conversations regarding the PSA that occurred outside of an open meeting. The GCA has stated that taking these corrective steps will not only provide the public with transparency about the board's action in engaging in a rolling quorum, but help ensure transparency in complying with the OMA moving forward. So in response to that, I prepared a draft summary to meet the CGA's requirements that I will read out loud now and give the board time to sit with it and provide any other corrections or additions so that we can submit this to correct the public record. So specifically, to address the requirement of a summary of the OMA violations outlined in the letter, to be a clear explanation of the actions and discussions that occurred outside of an open meeting regarding the PSA for legal services. The first part being how and when these conversations occurred. The third part being the discussions between board members regarding a PSA with Cuddy and McCarthy at the law conference, which occurred last May, early June in 2024, and the individuals that I polled regarding the potential PSA. This is lengthy, so I apologize, but I'm going to now read to you. From my information, so this is again, I want to reiterate, this is a draft summary I am presenting for the board's consideration, and we will have an agenda item at the next regularly scheduled session of the board to either correct, add to, or clarify the draft statement, because there's quite a bit here. Okay. So from my information and belief, the conversations for professional services agreement, hereinafter referred to as a PSA, began on Wednesday, April 10th, 2024. Dr. Kettler traveled with 3 board members using a district vehicle assigned to Dr. Kettler. Dr. Kettler drove Mr. Talley, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Otero to a regional New Mexico school boards training held in Magdalena, New Mexico. I was not in attendance either during the travel nor the regional NMSBA training. I neither participated in the event or the conversation that occurred. Sometime during the travel, Mrs. Otero inquired if Mr. Bennett and Talley were happy or satisfied with the quality of legal counsel received from current board counsel Roxy de Santiago, who is employed by the Walsh Gallegos law firm and commonly referred to herself as the board's counsel. From recounts of the conversation shared with me, all persons traveling together expressed their individual opinions or observations of their experience with Mrs. de Santiago, including Dr. Kettler, who allegedly was also unsatisfied. In particular, a concern was raised that Dr. Kettler regularly engaged with Ms. de Santiago and Mr. Madral from the Melendres law firm about day-to-day concerns, hence had a relationship with Dr. Kettler that could impact their ability to fairly advise the board in matters concerning the superintendent-board employment relationship. Mr. Bennett did call me on Thursday, April 11th, 2024 to tell me about the conversation and ask how the board could find a different law firm that would advise only the board and not be available to the superintendent. I told him I was unsure and would need to ask questions. Part of my research included calling a former colleague and personal friend who had served as a superintendent of a New Mexico district that was not the Los Lunas district, to ask how the board could secure legal counsel other than those selected in the most recent request for proposal. That person told me that one solution would be to request a PSA from the legal firm the board is interested in hiring and to look up the requirements in the procurement code. I learned that this is considered common practice for superintendents to authorize a purchase order for PSAs up to the state limit of $60,000, and these PSAs do not require board action. In my research, I learned that when a board policy does not exist about a specific topic, the language in statute is in its place. For instance, currently the Los Lunas Schools BOE does not have a specific policy that details when any PSA must come before the board for public discussion and vote. Therefore, the procurement code allows the superintendent of schools to accept a PSA and authorize a purchase order for amounts up to $60,000. We learned from the recent investigation, we being the Board of Education, learned from the recent investigation into allegations of misconduct committed by Dr. Kettler, that Dr. Kettler accepted more than 20 PSAs and authorized corresponding purchase orders for amounts up to $60,000 for each of the more than 20 PSAs. None of these were presented in finance meetings or included in the consent portion of the board meeting. Then on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024, after a properly announced board work session and before the regular meeting, in the board conference room, I specifically asked if board colleagues were satisfied with the quality of the representation provided by Ms. De Santiago. Present in the room were Mrs. Otero and Mr. Bennett, Talley, and Vickers. My notes and assertions are that all persons in the room expressed their negative opinions about the services provided to the board from Ms. De Santiago. I did then ask if I should begin to look for another law firm specifically for the purpose of providing counsel to the board. I also specifically mentioned the possibility of looking first at Cuddy and McCarthy, as I had some knowledge of their expertise in public school law. Again, my notes and assertions are that no person objected to me looking into the process of identifying different counsel for the board. However, I do want to add that at the July 16, 2024 regularly scheduled board meeting, when I recounted the specific situation during the discussion of the agenda items specific to the PSA for Cuddy, I believe that should be June 16th, by the way, my correction. Both Mr. Talley and Vickers stated that they did not recall this conversation. After the work session held on Tuesday, April 23rd, 2024, in which Mrs. Sanders, who was a former superintendent of schools, attended, I did ask Mrs. Sanders about her knowledge of PSAs for legal services for the district. Mrs. Sanders stated that the Cuddy Law Firm had previously provided legal services and utilized a PSA, and she believed the PSA would still be current. She did contact me a few days after the work session to state that there were 2 current PSAs with Cuddy in the district, and that I should connect with Laura Castile about at the upcoming law conference to ask other questions. Before the special meeting of the board held on Tuesday, May 7, 2024, I did relay the information learned about Cuddy, specifically that the board did have 2 current PSAs with Cuddy. One PSA was for a very specific situation and not suitable for the board's purposes. And the second PSA was for general legal counsel, which was suitable for the board's purposes. I did again ask the board colleagues if they were comfortable with me pursuing the next steps associated with either extending the current PSA or requesting a revised PSA with Cuddy. From my personal notes, there were no objections or other concerns raised. In my defense, I believed and still believed I was exhibiting good boardsmanship by confirming the desires of the board. However, the Attorney General determined that by me asking my colleagues about their desires, I therefore pulled the board, which is a violation of OMA. Then 4 members of the board attended the school law conference in Albuquerque, New Mexico on Thursday, May 30th through Saturday, June 1st. That should be Thursday, May 29th through Saturday, June 1st, 2024. Specifically, Mr. Bennett, Vickers, and Mrs. Otero, who attended sessions only on Thursday, May 30th, and I attended the school law conference. Excuse me. The board properly noticed via written announcements of meetings that were normally distributed as required by law, the possibility of a quorum at this conference as required by the Open Meetings Act. The school law conference is an opportunity for board members to learn, ask questions, and get information from legal experts in the field of school law, and is sponsored by Cuddy and the New Mexico School Boards Association. Many conference sessions were presented by attorneys from Cuddy. As well, many conference sessions were presented by representatives from the Walsh Gallegos and the Ortiz Zamora law firms, both of whom were selected to provide legal services for the board during the most recent RFP. All members of the board had opportunities to ask questions of and speak to all of the attorneys presenting or available at the conference. During the conference, the board had meals together wherein a quorum of the board may have been present and attended sessions wherein a quorum of the board may have been present. On Thursday, May 29th, 2024, I made a point of locating the Cuddy booth and obtained 5 copies of Ms. Castile's business card. Throughout the day, as I met up with the 3 members of the board in attendance, I did provide Ms. Castile's business card and encouraged them to go meet Ms. Castile or talk with others from Cuddy. I provide Ms. Castile's business card to Mr. Talley at the next meeting of the board, or at least I think I attempted to provide it, but I couldn't find it in my bag.
Sounds correct.
That's correct. So during the school law conference, I did text Ms. Castile. I did ask about her availability and willingness to meet in person during some point during the conference. Both Mr. Bennett and I met with Ms. Castile after the conference sessions ended on Friday, May 31st, sorry. During this meeting, we asked questions about the existing PSAs, specifically how PSAs are executed, the limitations and allowances for the board to utilize the existing PSA, the suggested best course of action given the existing PSA would expire on June 30th, 2024, and why Cuddy was not selected for the most recent RFP. In my opinion, neither I nor Mr. Bennett conducted board business by asking these questions. And again, in my opinion, both Mr. Bennett and I were attempting to be well informed about the area that neither of us have subject matter expertise. On Monday, June 3rd, 2024, I did email Dr. Kettler and requested he submit a purchase order for Cuddy in the amount not to exceed $59,999. Dr. Kettler refused the request by stating that he conferred with Mr. Melendres of the Madraw Law Firm about the board president's ability to request a purchase order to put in place a PSA for legal services specific to the board. Mr. Melendres advised that the action should be a public vote of the board because the PSA would be for the services of the entire board, which the president cannot make that decision for the board. My response to Dr. Kettler's refusal was, and I quote, FYI, previously I asked my colleagues if my colleagues would entertain a PSA with a different law firm other than the Walsh Gallegos law firm, and all said yes. At the law conference, I provided to 3 of my 4 colleagues the contact information for the Cuddy law firm and encouraged them to speak to Ms. Castile for their satisfaction. My point from the conversation with Ms. Castile, I have the authority to request the PSA. Additionally, I have no qualms or concerns in raising this to a formal vote whatsoever and in any format, whether that be executive or a regular session, end quote. So that conversation is in response to the first 2 required items from the GCA. This next portion is to respond to the requirements from the GCA in that I record any and all conversations regarding the PSA that occurred outside of an open meeting. In response to this specific requirement from the Attorney General, the following is additional information the board has learned from the most recent investigation into allegations of misconduct committed by Dr. Kettler. I was unaware of all of these events until the investigation occurred and the evidence was collected by DDSK. Specifically, the board learned of Dr. Kettler's overarching plan to disrupt the board's intention to secure legal counsel from Cuddy. For instance, on May 28th, 2024, one day before the school law conference, Dr. Kettler sent a text message to board member Talley where Dr. Kettler discussed with Mr. Talley the PSA with Cuddy. Next, Dr. Kettler telephoned board members Justin Talley and Mr. Vickers and communicated his opinion that the board did not have a need of legal advisement from Cuddy, given that the board had secured through the RFP process completed in 2023 access to 4 reputable legal firms. Additionally, Mr. Bennett reported that Dr. Kettler confronted him in the parking lot after a board meeting about the purpose of having the PSA with Cuddy, as Dr. Kettler believed the PSA was for the sole purpose of firing him as superintendent. Then approximately 15 minutes before the board meeting on Tuesday, June 18th, 2024, Dr. Kettler directed an employee in the finance department, Michelle Romero, CPO, to attend the board meeting. Further, Dr. Kettler manipulated board member Justin Talley to appear at the June 18th, 2024 board meeting telephonically from Germany to request to move the Cuddy PSA from the consent portion of the board agenda to the top of the action items on the board agenda. During the discussion of the agenda item for the PSA, Dr. Kettler then asked Ms. Romero to come to the podium and make remarks to the board regarding the Cuddy PSA. Mrs. Romero was neither brief nor prepared to advise the board in that moment and made 5 statements that ranged from misleading to inaccurate. Ultimately, the board took a vote based on Dr. Kettler's personal agenda and dishonest motive and the intentional manipulation of 2 board members and other misinformation. Dr. Kettler, knowing that he was being dishonest with his supervisors, which is the board, failed to correct the public and the board's understanding of the Cuddy PSA. Additionally, upon information and belief, Dr. Kettler directed the current PSA with Cuddy, which was set to expire on June 30th, 2024, to be closed on June 21st, 2024, 3 days after the board meeting, which resulted in an audit finding. Specifically, Cuddy billed services during the month of June pursuant to the open purchase order, but when the bill arrived, the purchase order had been closed. The district's auditor confirmed, however, that the superintendent has the ability to sign PSAs not to exceed $60,000 and stated there were no significant unusual transaction. The auditor, however, noted that the board does not have a policy regarding which contracts and agreements they want to review and approve prior to delegating executive authority to the superintendent. In short, prior to me requesting a PO for the renewed PSA with Cuddy, Dr. Kettler did not identify any issue with authorizing over 20 PSAs until the PSA for Cuddy was discussed. Then he declined to sign the PSA for Cuddy and insisted that it would require board approval. Instead, Dr. Kettler filed an OMA complaint with the Attorney General and provided only partial information to the Attorney General. So there are the required corrective actions is that while I specifically denied violations of the procurement code as cited herein, and in spite of other arguments presented, the board does and will continue to abide by the procurement code. The board has already received training from the district CFO on December 19th, 2024 on the procurement code. The board strives to continue learning and growing at every opportunity. Additionally, the board has conducted a full review of past legal service procurements. The board had a PSA in place for all legal services billed through Cuddy through June 21st, 2024. There were no improper expenditures. The board is drafting a policy to clear up any confusion as to when a contract must be brought to the board for review. Currently, there is no policy, and the superintendent, as with numerous other districts, can sign non-competitive contracts for amounts up to $60,000. The district's most recent audit requires that the board develop a policy on contract approval. The board has engaged in OMA training during the NMSBA board trainings that have occurred in December 2024 and again February 13th, 14th, and 15th, 2025, and can ensure full compliance with all OMA. And finally, the board has already engaged in OMA training as recently as February 13th through 15th, 2025. The board commits to engage in ongoing training on the OMA. So those are draft responses, and again, I invite colleagues at the next board meeting to correct, add to, or delete any statements that I have made if they are in error. So that concludes,
That,
yes,
this has to be good.
Yes.
Make sure we get a copy to Karen Wolf.
absolutely, absolutely. I will make sure, Mrs. Wolf, that you have a copy for the record, because I know that that was probably a little difficult for you to keep up on.
Well, except when I got it from the election round.
Yeah, that's okay. No, you'll have a copy of what I just read. Okay. So item G is accomplished. Let's move on to item H. Item H is an unusual item, and this came as a,
I'm so sorry, do you guys have to do like a formal something to this or no?
there's confusing information that the board and then the superintendent's office received. So let me go back and fill in the public on what what occurred. Sorry. No, it's okay. We want to get this right. So the board received an email from Joe Guillen, who is the the executive director for the NMSBA, the New Mexico School Boards Association, that reminded the board that we had until the end of that date, which, correct me if I'm wrong, was April 24th, that all boards had to certify in one of two options that they would be in compliance with expectations for Title VI in order to receive federal funds. From one of our board presentations, Title VI, which is Fund Account 25184, please correct me if I'm wrong, is approximately $97,000. Is that correct? Okay. So option one was forward the New Mexico PEDS letter to ocr@ed.gov and state that your district adopts the state's position, which is to be in compliance with the provisions associated with Title VI. Option two is to sign and submit the Title VI certification letter provided by OCR directly to ocr@ed.gov. And that either option is acceptable. What matters most is that a response is submitted by the deadline. Additionally, we received information that this should be brought to the public's attention by stating that we did submit this letter as is required. And it was at a very late date. And I think Mrs. Chavez may have some more information to add to that. So Mrs. Chavez, did you have some other clarifying information about the timeliness that we received this?
Yes, so in a New Mexico Public Education Department phone call with Secretary Padilla, we were informed about this letter formally, although we had seen this letter because it had been circulated amongst news sources, but we had not received it in our district. So I did speak to cabinet members to ask if any of them had received the letter. They had not received the letter at that time. In the PED call with Secretary Padilla, she told us that at that time that we did not have to respond to the letter and we would wait for more information. That occurred on April 17th. We fast forward a week ahead and we received information from Marty Madrid, who is the president of the Superintendent's Association for the state of New Mexico. And he provided us with two options based on what he was receiving advice from Secretary Padilla. And it was option one, that we would adopt the state's position, which is PED did send a letter to the Office of Education at the federal level, and that we were in agreement with that. Option two was to sign and submit the certification letter provided by OCR directly, and either option was acceptable. We chose option two, and we also did decide to add this as part of our agenda for tonight's meeting, so that way it would be informed for the public. And the reason we did choose option two, we had to choose one of the two. And we felt that moving forward with option two would provide the information specific to Los Lunas schools.
And be received by the Department of Ed. We ensured that we submitted the certification so that nothing could go haywire somewhere between us going through the PED to make sure that we were included. But
Correct.
to ensure we met the timeliness and the date.
Correct.
Correct.
And just learning from other districts across the state via district council through the Zamora law firm, it varied district to district on what option was chosen. But we did not have a choice to ignore this, and it was due on April 24th. So we did meet that deadline and it was submitted to the Department of Education.
When was the first time that we received this via email?
April
I'm looking
20
at mine and it's April 24th.
April
April
24th.
So April
24th.
24th at, see if I can find the time. I'm sure I can. Sometime April 24th, we received this letter and it is due on April 24th.
That is
11.
correct.
Just for public's information, we received this. How are we supposed to get the board together that day? And I mean, that alone could be a,
It was at 11:04 a.m.
And especially what's what's also interesting to note is we have a budget that needs to be passed by May 12th. This was our last scheduled meeting of the board. And it was due April 24th. And these are federal funds that are included in our budget. So it was, anyway, trying to be fully transparent. I listed it as an item on the agenda so that we could provide the background information and provide an opportunity for board members to ask any questions. If you would like to, it was the superintendent's, fell in her purview to submit on behalf of the district, but I still wanted everybody to be very aware of what was submitted on behalf of the district. So is there any questions or?
Short notice.
Mr. Vickers? Short notice, yeah, it was quick, it was tight.
It seems pretty clear that this is a requirement that districts have to do to receive funds from the
Yeah.
1964 Civil Rights Act.
And I don't think we've ever had to do this before, have we, Mrs. Tracy? Have we ever had to submit a certification for any one of the federal funds?
We have submit assurances, but not a certification through this form.
Okay, but we've signed on those assurances because they've been a board agenda.
Correct, they've been part of the applications, but
Right.
it doesn't, they do not look like this one.
Okay. All right,
One more point of interest, I looked through all, because this is a forwarded email to us. The first date that I see on the forward is April 22nd from OCR. Then it was forwarded from, hang on one second, from Marty Madrid on April 23rd. Then from Mariana Padilla, same day, April 24th, from PED. So there was no foresight in sending this to any of the school districts.
no. No, there is not. Okay. So the fun part is done. Let's now move to item I.
Do we need to? make
It's
a
not
motion?
really,
Whether we do it or not, it's done, but.
well, it was in the purview of the superintendent,
Okay.
but Mrs. Chavez and I both agreed that we wanted the public to be informed about the timing, the background, the need, the
Okay,
unusual occurrence of it being a certification as opposed to an assurance. So that was the biggest point for putting it on the board agenda. Okay, we are now on item I, discussion with possible action. The Board of Education delegating representatives of the board to meet with representatives from the New Mexico Public Schools Insurance Authority in a meeting to discuss ongoing litigation. So I would stand for a motion regarding item I.
Madam President, I would move that we would have two members of this board attend that meeting, and first I'd like to be one of them.
So you move the two members of the board, including yourself and one other member?
I would suggest you, Dr. Osowski.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Talley. Is there any discussion?
The only discussion as is moving forward, any discussions or any information need to be involved with the board. I think we need to also always make a motion and have it properly voted on to be present instead of violating any kind of OMAs.
Absolutely, agree with that 100%. And we've actually done that practice, Mr. Bennett, so, but it's hard to get used to. We've done it in the past before the OMA, but absolutely moving forward. Is there any other discussion?
I just have a question.
Sure.
Is there any reason that we could not do this in executive session and have the whole board?
Actually, the results from this will come forward in an executive session. This is an opportunity for the particular litigation that we're speaking of. NIPSIA assigned counsel that we've never met with, and has, maybe limited information on the background. So the meeting on Friday is a deep dive to make sure that that council has all of the background information, including clarifying maybe misperceptions. And then from there, whatever course of action that council and NIPSIA choose to go forward with will come back to the board in a closed executive session. So this is more for filling in gaps in information. This is not for any decision making. It's really just big gaps.
Okay.
Huge gaps, so. But yeah, any further action I've specifically requested come to this board and we go into closed executive session and that we're not left in the dark for months.
Okay.
So, yes. Any other discussion? I will call for a vote. Mr. Bennett, that was your motion.
Yes.
Mr. Tally,
Yes.
Mr. Vickers,
Yes.
and I vote yes, motion passes 4-0. And we are on to item J, announcement of meetings. So on May 13th, 2025, there will be a finance committee meeting in the central office conference room at 3:00 p.m. And on May 20th, there will be a regular board meeting in the central office boardroom beginning at 6:00 p.m. Would stand for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Oh, boy.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Tally moved and Mr. Bennett seconded. I am going to call for the vote. Mr. Vickers,
Yes.
Mr. Bennett,
Yes.
Mr. Tally,
Yes.
and I vote yes, motion passes 4-0. Meeting is adjourned at 8:13 p.m.